All right, so welcome back to the Explainer. Today, we are tearing into the Cambridge Mathematics 0580 syllabus, and I'm giving you the absolute ultimate strategy guide to mastering vector geometry and mathematical transformations. Look, if you've ever bled marks on an exam because your descriptions of movements just weren't precise enough, or you kind of panicked trying to find a center of enlargement, well, you're in the right place. This is the exact blueprint you need. We're going to decode exactly what those examiners are hunting for in every single transformation type. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're starting with vector geometry, locking down the transformation core, and then we're breaking down the big four: reflection, rotation, translation, and enlargement. Oh, and real quick, before we get into the weeds, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Ace the Exams, at acetheexams_IGCSE to excel in your Cambridge examinations. Make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the bell icon right now. Section 1. Vector geometry, or navigating the grid. Before we start sliding whole shapes all over the place, we really have to understand how simple paths between points are expressed mathematically. In vector geometry, we usually represent these paths using lowercase letters, variables like a and b. So think of it like this. If walking the path from point G to point A is vector A, and from G to B is vector B, we can map out entirely complex shapes. We're talking regular hexagons, parallelograms, the whole shebang, just by adding and subtracting those fundamental paths. Take a look at this ratio, 1 to 3. In vector geometry, knowing how points divide lines in specific ratios like this is absolutely critical. For example, you might see a point R dividing a line QS in a 1 to 3 ratio. If you master how to write those divisions in terms of A and B, you unlock the ability to mathematically prove the magnitude of vectors, and you can confirm for sure if two lines are perfectly parallel. It's literally the bedrock of geometric proof. Now, right before we get to the specific movements, we've got to talk about the inverse transformation. Simply put, this is the transformation that maps the image completely back onto its original object. I want to define this right out of the gate. Keep it in the back of your mind. As we figure out how to push shapes forward, I want you priming your brain, asking yourself, okay, but how would I mathematically undo this exact movement? Moving on to Section 2, the transformation core, object versus image. Let's lay down the central anchor of all these mathematical movements. When something undergoes a transformation, it's changing its position or its shape. Your starting point, the original shape, is always called the object. Its new position or new shape after the move is known as the image, object versus image. If you want full marks, this is the foundational vocabulary you have to use. All right, Section 3, reflection, also known as the flip, our very first specific transformation. In the syllabus, this is explicitly described as a flip movement. The object just flips across a specific dashed or broken line. We call that the mirror line. Sounds simple enough, right? We've all looked in a mirror, but how do we actually prove it mathematically on an exam grid? Well, here is the exact geometric proof the examiners are begging to see. For a reflection, a point on the object and its equivalent point on the image must be completely equidistant from the mirror line. But wait, there's more. That distance must be measured at right angles, perfectly perpendicular to the mirror line. That perpendicular line joining the point to its image, that is the absolute key to proving our reflection. Don't forget it. Next up is Section 4, rotation, or the turn. Now, unlike the flip of a reflection, a rotation is a very distinct turning movement. But shapes don't just spin around wildly in empty space, right? They turn around a very specific anchor point on the grid. So, when you are asked to describe a rotation, there are 3 absolute non-negotiables you must state to secure full marks. Don't leave any of these out. Number 1, the center of rotation, which is usually given as a coordinate. Number 2, the angle of the turn, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. And number 3, the direction. You have to specifically state whether it is clockwise or anti-clockwise. Miss even one of these 3 parameters and your answer is incomplete. Examiners will dock you for sure. Let's put your understanding to the test. If an object's image is rotated 90 degrees clockwise to reach its new position, what is its inverse transformation? Think back to our definition of undoing a movement. To map that shape backward to the original object, you just reverse the direction. So the inverse is a rotation of 90 degrees anti-clockwise around the exact same center point. Visualizing this reversal technique is a brilliant way to double-check your work in the exam room. And speaking of double-checking your strategies, stop scrolling, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Ace the Exams, at acetheexams_IGCSE to excel in your Cambridge examinations. We want you to crush these papers, so go hit that button. All right, let's slide right into Section 5, Translation, the slide. This is arguably the most straightforward transformation because it's a pure, straight, sliding movement. The biggest thing to remember here? Absolutely no rotation is involved. None. The shape stays perfectly upright, keeping its exact orientation, and just slides on across the coordinate plane.
Because there's no turning or flipping happening, every single point on the object moves in the exact same way to its corresponding point on the image. So how do we describe this concisely? We use a single column vector. It's so clean. The top number dictates the movement left or right along the x-axis, and the bottom number dictates the movement up or down along the y-axis. That one single piece of column vector data is the only thing you need to fully describe a translation.
Finally, we reach Section 6, Enlargement, the scale. Let's transition to our last and, honestly, often the most complex transformation. Unlike the others we've looked at where the shape stays exactly the same size, an enlargement alters the scale. The resulting image stays mathematically similar to the object, meaning all the internal angles are identical and the proportions match up perfectly, but the overall size has fundamentally changed. There are two specific rules you have to give to properly describe an enlargement. First, the position of the center of enlargement. Second, the scale factor of enlargement. Now listen up, because here is a massive exam trap. An enlargement doesn't always mean the shape gets bigger. I know, the name is confusing. If the scale factor is greater than 1, then yes, the image is larger. But if the scale factor is a fraction between 0 and 1, like 1/2 or 1/3, it mathematically shrinks the image. Even though it's getting smaller, you still officially call the transformation an enlargement.
So how on earth do we find that tricky center of enlargement if you're just staring at the object and the image on a grid? Well, it takes a foolproof step-by-step visual method. Step 1, grab your ruler and join corresponding points on the object and image with a straight line. Step 2, extend those lines way past the shapes. Step 3, just look for the intersection. The exact meeting point where all those extended lines cross, boom, that is your center of enlargement.
Let's see how this builds into one of the trickiest concepts on the paper, positive versus negative enlargement. With a standard positive enlargement, the image stays on the exact same side of the center of enlargement as the original object. But with a negative enlargement, the image and the object are in completely opposite sides of that center point. It practically jumps right across the center to the other side of the grid. Take a look at this negative scale factor, -2. This is a classic pitfall where students drop marks left and right. The number 2 calculates the size ratio, right? Meaning the image will be twice as large as the object. But that minus sign, what does it do? That minus sign dictates the opposite spatial position. It's telling you the image has flipped completely over to the opposite side of the center point. So you calculate your distance, and then you plot it in the complete reverse direction. We have covered the complete transformation blueprint today, from vector paths and right-angled reflections all the way to center points and tricky negative scale factors. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If an object on your exam paper goes through a massive, complex sequence of translations, rotations, and negative enlargements, do you possess the spatial blueprint to map it all the way back to its origin? Keep practicing those inverse concepts. Trace those vector paths backwards, and you will completely master the grid. And here is your final reminder. Drop a comment below with your target grade and subscribe to our YouTube channel Ace the Exams at @acetheexams_IGCSE to excel in your Cambridge examinations. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next one.